So I've talked about many things on this channel, ranging from best bosses and worst bosses to lore videos like which Elden Ring ending is the best in terms of lore. So I've talked about many things Soulsborne wise, but I haven't went over the most powerful Souls bosses, specifically from the Dark Souls series. So today I'm going to pick out the strongest bosses from the Dark Souls games and talk about them to see out of all of them which is the most powerful. And yes, this is a hand-picked list because bro, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not ranking all that shit, especially from all 3 games. Don't get me wrong though, I did some research and I think their placement will make sense to a lot of you. Also, before I get started, this is just my interpretation and opinion. My list is not a definitive ranking of the boss's strength. Still feel free to disagree or agree in the comments and let me know if I messed up something or if I was, correct. So yeah, without wasting any more of your time, let's start with the least powerful person. Does that even make sense? Anyways, let's just get into the video. The old Ivory King was one of the strongest human rulers in Dark Souls history, and his legacy proves it. He wasn't just a king sitting on a throne, he was a warrior leading his knights into battle and personally holding back the old chaos. This was the same chaos that gave birth to the demons and destroyed entire kingdoms, so it was, basically like hell itself. The Ivory King actually managed to contain it, for a time. That alone shows he was stronger than most of the lords in the series. His greatest feats was building Lois, a kingdom designed to hold back the Chaos Flame. Instead of running from it, he and his knights chose to fight it head on. He was so powerful that he even entered the old Chaos himself to try to put an end to it. Unfortunately, even he couldn't stop it, and in the end he was consumed by it, becoming a mindless warrior within the flames. But compared to the others on this list, he falls short. While he was clearly one of the strongest human kings, he wasn't a god or powerful creature like a dragon. His strength came from his leadership and willpower, but in terms of having powerful abilities, he's a bit outclassed to be honest. If he had some kind of divine power, then maybe he would have been able to stop the Chaos Flame for good, but in the end he was just a man fighting against something far greater than himself. That said, his willpower and leadership still stood out to me. Even after his death, his knights stayed behind, continuing to fight against the old chaos in his name. That goes to show what kind of ruler he was. He may be the weakest on this list in terms of pure power, but in terms of determination, he's one of the best. But still, don't get it twisted, this man is still one of the strongest bosses in Dark Souls 2 lore-wise. The Bed of Chaos is a weird one. It's not strong in the traditional sense where you can picture it wielding a sword or casting spells or whatnot, but in terms of destructive potential, it's ridiculously powerful. This thing is the source of all demons in Dark Souls. Without it, demons wouldn't even exist, and that alone makes it an important force in the series. Its power comes from the fact that it's completely out of control. Unlike other beings that are trained for centuries or were born gods, the Bed of Chaos was an accident. When the Witch of Isolate tried to recreate the first flame, she ended up turning into this abomination instead. This also led to both her and her daughters being mutated. It kept spreading its influence, corrupting everything around it, and basically turning Isolate into a nightmare. But despite its massive impact on the world, the Bed of Chaos isn't really a fighter. In terms of raw power, it's honestly kind of pathetic if you think about it. It doesn't really attack much, it just, flails around and swipes at you. The real threat is the shitty ass arena. That's why it ranks so low on the list. That being said, you can't ignore its impact. If not for the Bed of Chaos, demons wouldn't exist and the world of Dark Souls might look completely different. It even created some of the most powerful beings like the Demon Prince, who was a serious threat, even in Dark Souls 3. So while the Bed of Chaos itself isn't much of a fighter, the fact that it spawned some of the strongest creatures ever still makes it a major powerhouse in my opinion. The Giant Lord was the leader of the Giants during the war against Drang Lake, and in terms of sheer size and strength, he's one of the biggest threats in Dark Souls 2. He led an entire army of giants against King Vendrick's kingdom, and judging by the destruction they caused, he wasn't just some random brute. This dude was a legitimate war leader. One of the most important things to understand about the Giant Lord is how powerful giants are in the first place. Even the regular ones are massive, tanky, and capable of tearing apart fortresses. But even with all that power, the Giant Lord lost the war. King Vendrick and his knights managed to fight back and eventually defeated them. This is the biggest reason why he doesn't rank higher. He was clearly a terrifying force, but compared to gods, dragons, or some of the other creatures in the games, he's still just a really powerful warrior. That being said, his impact was massive. His invasion of Drangley completely changed the kingdom's fate, and even after his death, remnants of his power remained. The giants still had enough strength to be a serious threat, and the memories of their battles still linger in the game's world. He may not be on the level of, let's say, Gwyn, but in terms of pure physical power, he was one of the strongest warlords in Dark Souls history. The Nameless King is a mystery, but what we do know about him is terrifying. He's heavily implied to be Gwyn's firstborn son, which means he inherited some of his father's godlike power, but instead of staying with the gods, he abandoned them to side with the dragons. That alone makes him stand out. In terms of combat ability, the Nameless King seems to be one of the strongest warriors in the lore. He's a master of lightning just like his father, but he also rides a storm drake as well, making him even harder to defeat. The fact that he managed to tame and command dragons shows how powerful he really is. And we saw how Gwyn's lightning literally wiped out the dragons, or at least almost wiped out the dragons. What makes him even more terrifying is the fact that he's completely fearless. He gave up his place among the gods and vanished from history, yet he never seemed to care. Now, it doesn't take a genius to guess that this guy was insanely powerful in terms of power and combat skills. I mean, come on, his dad is literally Gwyn. Despite his lack of known feats, this goes to show that he was a force to be reckoned with. But despite all of this though, he's still below the top 3 in the verse in my eyes. I mean, as far as powerful warriors goes, he's up there, don't get me wrong, but again, his lack of feats makes me place him here. Midir is easily one of the most powerful dragons in the series. He was raised by the gods specifically to consume the dark, hence the name Darkeater. This means that he was handpicked as a counter to one of the most dangerous forces in Dark Souls. The fact that he was able to survive all of that exposure and not become corrupted proves just how absurdly strong he is. Mind you, this is the same dark that Gwyn himself was somewhat scared of. Midir's soul description reads, Midir, descendant of archdragons, was raised by the gods and owing to his immortality was given a duty to eternally battle the dark. A duty that he would never forget even after the gods perished. So according to his soul, it says that he's also immortal. Now, to be fair, the immortality that they are most likely referring to is the fact that he has thick scales, which makes most dragons immune to a lot of physical attacks and any types of diseases. Now, how the hell were we able to attack and deal damage to him without lightning is not specified, but I think it's most likely due to the fact that he consumed so much of the dark to the point where he became way weaker than he originally was, at least physically. But despite all of that, he isn't unstoppable. He still falls eventually, and compared to the top guys on this list, he would most likely hold his own in a fight but eventually get defeated due to them having some counter against him.
With the strength of lords, they challenge the dragons.
Now Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, gets a spot. Gwyn was a god leading the war against the everlasting dragons and ushering the Age of Fire. At his peak, he was insanely powerful. He wielded lightning strong enough to break through dragon scales, something that was supposed to be impossible. Alongside his knights, he completely wiped out the dragons, ending their rule and reshaping the world in his own image. But the problem with Gwyn is that we never actually seen him at his peak. By the time we meet him, he's a hollowed, zombified husk of his former self. After sacrificing himself to the flame, his power drained, leaving him a broken Lord of Cinder we see in the game. That's why the fight is so easy. This is not the Gwyn that conquered the world. The real Gwyn was someone not to be messed with. Even with that in mind, he wasn't invincible. The Age of Fire wasn't eternal, and by the time of Dark Souls, it was already fading. He also feared the dark, not the oh shit turn off the lights type of dark, but the actual forts itself, which is why he tried to keep control of humans who carried the Dark Soul. That fear eventually led to his downfall, as his attempt to extend the Age of Fire only delayed the inevitable. Despite all of this though, Gwyn's influence can't be ignored. His power shaped the entire world of Dark Souls, and even in his weakened state, he was still a dangerous opponent. Again, I just think that this man was way more powerful than what people give him credit for. Manus is without a doubt one of the most dangerous beings in Dark Souls. He's the source of the abyss, the darkness that corrupts everything it touches. Manus was just a sorcerer, but due to his insanity, he was sealed away for a long time. But when people disturbed his grave, he broke free and everything went to hell. What makes Manus so terrifying is that his powers are limitless. He's not just strong, he's like a walking force of corruption. He doesn't just fight with brute strength, he warps reality all around him, because his magic also distorts time and space, as he was able to literally grab us from the future and bring us back to the past, by just opening up a portal, and his connection to the abyss allows him to spread his darkness like a plague. The biggest reason Manus takes his spot is because even after his death, his influence remains, creating beings and things like Nishandra and the Pus of Man. But still, don't get it twisted, he's also formidable in a fight as well. I mean, not even notorious, Gwyn's strongest knight was able to defeat him. I mean, look what happened to him. I think the only reason we were able to defeat him is probably because we have the ability to actually boost our strength and other stats, and the fact that we can respawn. So I think a lore accurate fight between Manus would look similar to the Dormammu scene from Doctor Strange. But despite his incredible powers and strength, there's still someone that I believe is stronger than him. Now, the boss that I think is the most powerful in the entire Dark Souls series is none other than Gael. Okay, you might think I glaze Gael a lot, but bro, just hear me out. Gael's strength is insane, especially when you consider that he started off as just a normal knight. Unlike gods or dragons, he wasn't born with power, but instead he fought for it. So yeah, he grinded his way to the top. Over the course of many years, possibly thousands, he became powerful far beyond a normal warrior. By the time we find him, he has consumed the Dark Soul itself, putting him on a completely different level. Mind you, while Manus was the father of the Abyss, a corrupted, more unstable version of the Dark, this man Gael consumed the actual Dark Soul itself by killing the Pygmy Lords and consuming humanities. What makes Gael terrifying is that he never stops. His willpower is insane. I mean, this man was there at the beginning fighting with Gael as a slave knight, and at the literal end of the world he became the most powerful being to roam it. His biggest advantage is that he combines both brute strength with crazy powers. He has the speed, the durability, and the power of the Dark Souls, which again, something that Gwyn feared. Even Midir, as strong as he is, might struggle against Gael's raw power. So overall, Gael is one tough mofo, and that's why I placed him at the #1 spot. Cause come on, bro is just broken.